Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining for. I'm Reena Dayal, and I'm here to talk about the Thought Integrators video podcast series. The topic that we had for today was the human brain, interfaces, interventions, and ethics. Now, we have a very special situation that has happened right now, is that we are still waiting for our guests to join. So, what I'm going to do is use the time that we have to talk a little bit about our objectives from this podcast, and also through some topics related to the human brain. I'll talk a little bit about that, and hopefully our guest will join in the interim. So before we get into all of this, I want to take the opportunity to wish all of you a very happy new year 2022. And with the new year, we are bringing in a slight change to the way we are doing the podcast. So, for example, today's topic, talks not just about the developments on, the human brain related technology interventions, but we also go into the topic of ethics. And as the intent is, if that discussion happens today, then you'll hear about it today. Otherwise, when it gets rescheduled, we are going to go deeper into the topic of ethics, look at the kind of ethical questions that get raised as we examine different kinds of interventions and interfaces associated with a particular technology. In this case, how this relates to the human brain. And very interestingly, people have been asking me, okay, so what is the role of an ethicist? So, wherever we have an opportunity in a particular podcast to actually go deeper into a subject and, what it means to be a specialist in that area, we will, leverage the opportunity of a conversation with our guests to actually go deeper into that. So, for example, with Dr. Marcelo Ayenka, we'll actually, go deeper into the topic of what does it mean to be an ethicist, what kind of, professional roadmap is there for people who decide to work as ethicists? What does it mean to, go deeper into the topic of ethics? How much of science knowledge you need if you're talking about impact of science on ethics, and how much of social science knowledge you require, and what are the kind of courses that people could take in? What does that profession really look like? Who do you end up helping? Do you get involved? What kind of activities do you get involved in? So I think that's the kind of variation or addition, you can say, we've tried to bring in into these podcast series, these individual sessions of the podcast series. One of the things, I want to remind all of you is that, this video podcast series is actually focused on discussions around emerging and futuristic science and technology areas with the world-renowned experts. And the idea is to have the conversation in a manner where anybody who is science aware, right? I mean, anybody who has the basic knowledge of science, who remembers having studied science in class 8th, 9th, or 10th, would be able to catch up and, sort of understand some of the latest developments that are happening. And the idea behind this is that eventually we want to be able to explore the opportunity of how ordinary people, people who may be working in any industry, but they are science aware, and how do they get involved in the conversation around the adoption of a particular technology, and how do they influence policy decisions, right? And what are the kind of regulations that they want to call for? That doesn't mean that everybody needs to understand the regulation environment in detail, but but you can look at what does it mean for you, right? And what are the choices that are there? If you know what the choices are, you can make more informed decisions, you can make more informed opinions, you can express more informed opinions, and then, sort of get involved in a sense in that dialogue. So that's one thing. The second thing, since I have time today, I also wanted to take the opportunity to talk about the, the title of this podcast series. I have a few people asking me as to why is this series called the Thought Integrator series. Now, several years ago, I had written a book called Innovation Magic, The Science and Art of Innovation Management, which is an innovation management book. It sort of goes deeper into the the kind of skills that are required for innovation, the kind of organizational infrastructure that is required for innovation, and so on. And at that point in time, I postulated that, as we move forward, we will need so many multidisciplinary teams in all kinds of scenarios that we will need people who have a wide variety, a knowledge of a wide variety of topics, and they may have depth in one or two areas, but they will have, some amount of knowledge to a certain depth in a large number of topics. And I would call these people thought integrators, because these are the kind of people who become extremely important in these multidisciplinary teams. They sort of understand a little bit of each of these disciplines that may be represented in the team, and they are able to act as the sutradhar, which is an Hindi word, which actually means that the integrator, the person who actually integrates everybody's opinions and brings them on a common platform, thus enabling a product, platform, or a solution. So I think today we are living in an era where almost every product, platform, or solution that you talk about comprises of multiple technologies, multiple domains, and you actually have multiple multidisciplinary teams that may be working on it at any point in time. So the importance of this kind of individuals, or the thought integrators, has actually become more. The idea is that now I'm assigning that attribute of thought integration not to a person, but to this series, entire video podcast series. And the intent is to bring a little bit of that depth of knowledge across multiple technologies, across multiple science subjects. So in case you were wondering why Thought Integrator Talk Series, that's the reason. I'm doing a check. I think our guest is still not there. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the human brain and some of the advancements that at least I am familiar with, right? And I think some of the things that we are looking at from a human brain perspective is, if you look today, and for quite a few decades in the past, there has been a lot of effort to understand how the human brain functions, right? And come to think of it, it's a pretty remarkable feat of nature to create, something which is enclosed within the skull, which is so small in size, doesn't weigh much, doesn't use a lot of power in terms of the kind of power that is used by some of the massive computation machinery that we have with us, the various computers, supercomputers, and so on. And yet it does a lot of motor coordination. All our activities takes inputs from all kinds of sensors, all our senses, and creates decisions, takes decisions in split seconds, sends signals to our to the motor neurons in split seconds for actual action to happen. So when you're walking, you don't really consciously think, oh, I'm going to put my foot forward and I need to make sure that I'm balancing and I'm not going to fall over. Your brain just takes care of all of that automatically, right? And it happens at a speed that you can't, you can't actually observe that process happening in any sense. So given that we have such a remarkable, this human brain has such a remarkable capacity, there's always been this curiosity as to how it really functions. And if we can figure out how it functions, maybe we can create the best of AI systems or artificial intelligence, which could be as efficient in decision-making and so on and so forth. Now, maybe some of the things that I'm telling you are colored a little bit by a book that I have been reading recently. The book is called 1,000 Brains by Jeff Hawkins, and he has actually, gone into detail and talked about how he has, his research team has come up with some new models around how they believe the human brain functions, and building upon some of the research that people have done in the past. Now, there are multiple brain projects that are going on around the world. Some big ones in US. Some big ones, at least a very large one as part of the European Union, and of course, in some amount of research happening in almost every country which is, has some significant investments in science and technology. So So the whole idea is to see how we can sort of leverage the human brain as we move forward for on the AI front. Now, if you refer to that book, A Thousand Brains, very interesting thing that the author talks about is that when you look at the AI systems that we've sort of developed these specialized deep learning systems which focus on finding the perfect solution for a problem. And this is not modeled on the human brain at all, because we tend to be having a brain which sort of is able to do a reasonable job or some amount of specialization in almost anything. So, for example, anybody who puts their mind to start learning how to cycle will eventually learn how to cycle. Now, they may not become the winner of a bicycling race, but they would still be able to bicycle, right? And similarly, anybody who wants to learn how to sing can effectively sing to some extent. Now, they may not become the best singers in the world, but they can do a pretty decent job if they apply their mind to it. Similarly, everybody learns how to write, everybody learns how to read. And so that's the nature of the human brain, and the way most of the AI systems are being pursued today are, in a slightly different direction. So this is some interesting food for thought, and maybe a question as to what the direction needs to be for some of the future AI projects that people are looking at. I'm doing a time check again. We still don't have a guest. I hope he's, all right. Definitely not something that happens regularly. So I want to do a cross check. If there are a lot of people online, then maybe we can do questions. Otherwise, we may have to postpone this session and meet again. Okay, so I think we'll just go ahead and call it a day for today. All of you have a good weekend, and we will have this session. I apologize for the challenge that we faced today, and see you soon.